Welcome to Art Moves. This is Esther HC, and today I am here with Sigrid Strand from PlatteForum. And today is a very special episode because this is my last episode as the Art Moves podcast host, producer, and editor. I am handing over the podcast to Sigrid, who is the curator and program manager at PlatteForum. It's been incredible to be part of this program and to interview so many different amazing artists. And I know that Sigrid is just going to take this podcast and grow it into what it is meant to be. And there will be so many more episodes for us to enjoy. So I just want to say thank you to PlatteForum for allowing me to have this incredible opportunity. And it's been a pleasure working with PlatteForum and also working with Sigrid. So we had a really great conversation with Michael Dixon, who is PlatteForum's visiting resident artist this summer. And he's from Albion, Michigan. And Dixon is an oil painter and a full professor of art at Albion College. I will let Sigrid take it from here, and she can introduce a little bit more about Michael and his upcoming exhibition.
Today, we talked about Michael Dixon's experience as a biracial man in America, his recent discovery of his biological father and that he is one of 11 siblings, as well as his exploration and commitment to vulnerability in his work. Once Lost, Now Found, One Drop of Blood Between Us, paintings by Michael Dixon, as well as the Art Lab interns, is opening July 28th, 2023 from 6 to 8 p.m. at PlatteForum's Annex Gallery. The address is 3575 Ringsby Court in Denver, Colorado, 80216. And I do want to thank Esther so much for all of the work she's done on this podcast. I wouldn't know what to do or how to even get this started without her and all of the work she's done so far. So thank you, Esther. It's been amazing to learn under you and to hear all of the episodes you've recorded so far. I'm looking forward to working with our artists in this capacity moving forward, but I wouldn't know what to do without you, so thank you.
Oh, thanks.
I think one thing that I'm interested in the visual arts is expanding the conversation around race and identity to be more inclusive of stories that reflect my lived experience. Additionally, I think it's also important for people to see themselves in the world. And I think both of those things did not exist when I was a kid, at least to my knowledge. And so I think those are the two things that I'm very aware of is painting pictures that reflect my experience as a biracial Black person, a light-skinned biracial Black person in America. And then also complicating these conversations because most of our, typically conversations are binary. You're this or that. And I think, as we all know, it's much more complex. Now, as a kid, I was always very creative. I drew a lot as a way of entertaining myself. There were no artists in my, inner circle or outer circle to even know that I had that option of being an artist. I didn't know what an artist was necessarily. I had a very early experience. I had these Walt Disney encyclopedias that were kind of these encyclopedia books for kids. And in one of those books was a section on the Renaissance. And I remember going back to that book and just looking at it and being very enamored with Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and these Renaissance artists. I collected comics. That was another influence, an early influence. And I actually went to school for engineering. So I was more of a math science kid. And I dropped out of school a couple of different times. And so I had to do some soul searching as an undergrad early on about what do I envision myself doing that I feel like I would be happy doing. And art was kind of where I landed. And I knew immediately that I wanted to be a painter, an oil painter, and a figurative oil painter because of those Walt Disney encyclopedia books. Now, moving forward from there, I mean, it's the only reason I'm here today is because of really good mentorship. And I can't stress that enough. I stand on the heads and shoulders of many, 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 many people that ushered me to this point and that continue to usher me through this journey. And so that's kind of the journey in a nutshell. I think I was an undergrad in the kind of mid to late 90s. Identity work was really kind of hot at that point, and I was always very much attracted to artists that were pushing boundaries. This would be considered kind of tough work. So Michael Ray Charles, Robert Colescott, Kerry James Marshall. And then I eventually graduated from Arizona State University. And so there was one black professor, Beverly McKeever, and I was the only black art student. And Beverly McKeever is she's one of my dear friends and mentors, and she's family at this point, but was a huge influence on me as a young painter. I was flopping around as an undergraduate painter. Like I said, I was trying to figure out I didn't know what I wanted to say. I was trying to look for, I knew I wanted to say something about race. I was painting like Ku Klux Klan members and things like this. And I had signed up for a senior exhibition, but I graduated in the fall. I graduated December of 1999. And so I graduated, I had my diploma, and I had forgotten about the exhibition. And so maybe like in the spring, I get this email saying, oh, by the way, your exhibition's in 2 weeks. And I was like, oh man. And so I had to like come up with an exhibition. I had no idea. And so I made this body of work that was about my personal narrative. And I've been making that work ever since. Wow. So it was I found that content just in the nick of time. And so I've been making that content since that period. So
wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about this current body of work that you're working on at PlatteForum, and tell us about what all you've uncovered recently in your life?
Sure. So I've been the last, a few years or so, I've been working on, it's one body of work, but it's in 3 parts. It's kind of, it's 3 stories, but I'm considering this one body of work. And so the first story and the first body of work is called Pickaninny 1976. And my grandfather was a World War II vet, and obviously came back with massive PTSD and became an alcoholic. And so he kind of left my grandmother in California so that she could get on welfare and raise her 6 kids. So I actually didn't grow up with him. My biological father's black, my mother's white. I don't know my biological father. And so I met my mother's father one time, and my mother's parents both grew up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And so I met him once, and so my mother relayed this story to me. And so I was about 2 years old. I remember meeting him. I have this vivid memory of him picking me up, and I just remember his breath was very much like boozy, and for whatever reason that was like seared in my memory. But my mother relays the story that when he first met me, he said, "Where's that little pickaninny at?" So this first body of work and this first story is really me thinking about pickaninny imagery. And so for those of you that don't know, a pickaninny is a racist image of a black child. They're often playing by themselves along a shore. And so there's all this imagery with black babies along a shore, and then there's an alligator in the water, and the little tagline will say gator bait. as if the kids are going to get eaten by the alligator, right? And this imagery is ubiquitous. You can find postcards and things in antique stores, and it was a form of white humor. For me, there's a through line with this imagery and this humor in that there's this kind of imagery that's made. It's supposed to be funny. It's for a white audience. And then you have George Stinney Jr., youngest person to be electrocuted in America. He was 14. Emmett Till, 14, lynched by a white mob. And then you have Tamir Rice, more recently, he was 12 years old, shot by a police officer while playing in his front yard. And so for me, there's this through line of this violence that is meant to be funny, but it very much plays out in real world situations throughout history, all the way up, in the past and currently. And here's this word that my grandfather's throwing around. And so I've kind of taken that imagery of the alligator and the pickaninny, and I had this box of old photos of me as a kid. And so I've painted these images of me. And, there's these innocent images of me as this little cute kid. And then I've lovingly inserted this alligator in all of those images. That exhibition also has an alligator sculpture and a couple of videos along with the paintings. The videos are of alligators being fed. I went to a couple alligator parks to record the sounds and the imagery of what it sounds like and looks like for alligators to eat. And then on the opposite side of that is this beautiful little black baby just making little baby noises. And so the audience gets to fill in the blanks, right? What that humor looks like in real life, or if this were to really happen, what does that look like? It's and so that's kind of story one and body of work one. Body of work two, I'm mostly finished, but still kind of work. I still have a few things to do on it, but it's called Miscegenation Nation. Haven't really ever painted my mother. I've painted her a couple times, and I've a lot of my work is talking about my blackness to the exclusion of my whiteness, let's say. And so I wanted to kind of talk to my mother about her experiences. I was born in 1976. Loving versus Virginia was a Supreme Court case that was ruled on in 1967 that made it legal for people who were of different races to get married. So there was these anti-miscegenation laws in all over the country that made it illegal for people of different races to be in a marriage legally. And so in 1967, the Supreme Court said that was illegal. And so I was born 9 years after that. And so just because the Supreme Court says it's legal doesn't mean cultural attitudes change that quickly. So, I'm interested in my mother's story. Like, here's this white woman with a black kid. Like, are people staring? Are people saying things to you? Like, what was your experience like? And so I interviewed my mother, and it's imagery of my mother. And it's really kind of me trying to honor my mother and her story, but also think about this history or legacy of or anti-miscegenation laws, and what does that look like or feel like. And that's kind of body of work number two. And so as it happens, so the last body of work, I was going to go find my biological father and make work about it. And so I've been on 23andMe for about 3 years. And so in March, we're in July. Is this July? Mm-hmm. We're in July. And so in March, I happened to be visiting my mother, and I periodically check that thing, every once in a while. And I was looking on my 23andMe account, and a half sister on my father's side was there. She was not there prior. And so this contact pops up, and I contacted her immediately. She got back to me immediately. And so I found my biological father and have uncovered that I'm one of 11 kids. And so my biological father is currently in prison in Alaska, and so I've been in contact with 7 of the 11 kids, and we're just kind of meeting each other and learning about each other. So this body of work is me painting images of these brand new siblings that I just uncovered, and subsequently also I received a couple of photos of my biological father when he was about in his 40s, and then I also have this mugshot of his prison mugshot that I have, and so I've been painting some of that imagery as well. So it's me kind of unpacking this story, trying to discover who these people are that are my siblings. That's like I said, it's brand new, so it's kind of unfolding in real time. Some of them were excited to participate. Some of them decided not to participate. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And there's probably going to be more work in the future as this unfolds in real time. So that's what I'm working on right now.
So how has this process of discovering your family members and creating work about it changed you as a person, or how has it affected your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like as I mentioned, I'm 47. I think it's interesting because it's been very academic for me thus far. I think I've been in a space of like, this is something that's been on my mind since probably 2008. I did some work around this because I had decided like, oh, I'm going to find this guy, and then I chickened out. And so it's something that I've been creeping towards very slowly for a long time. And so I kind of wanted it. I was prepared. I wanted to find this person. And so I don't know how it's changed my life. I think I'm in a different space in that I know who this person is. Mm-hmm. I know where he is. I know what he looks like. And I think, it hasn't really changed my life much at this point, but I think, who knows what's going to happen as I start to meet these siblings and we start to interact. And I will say, and then the other little twist in the story is that my mother, since I was a little, my mother thought thought my biological father was this other person, and that doesn't really matter to me because I didn't know the other person either, and so that's the little twist. It kind of made my mom upset, but I think she's dealing with it. But so my mother thought my biological father was this other guy, and the story that I was told was that he had a kid, got my mother pregnant, and then the woman he had a kid with, the first kid with, got her pregnant again. So in my conceptualizing this person, I imagined if you have 3 kids, when you're 20, there's probably more kids. Check, that prophecy happened, and then I also was like, this guy could be dead, he could be in jail. Like, I don't know, he's a black man in America. There's lots of, black men in America don't usually live to be the ripe old age of 102. So I figured there's a good possibility he could be in jail or something. And check, that also came to be true. So the little twist was it was a different person than who my mother thought. And, that's okay, because I didn't know. I don't know either person, so it doesn't really matter to me. And so I don't know. It's still unfolding, and so I don't have a definitive answer in terms of how it has changed my life. Although like I said, the difference is that now I really know who this person is, and I know where he is, and I know what he looks like, and that's a new space, and I think a better space. So
yeah, and I mean, you haven't met any of these folks in person yet.
I haven't. No, I won't. I've talked to 3 of them over the phone and gotten their stories, and then we've been texting. That's mostly been how we've been communicating. So, yeah.
So the title of your work, Once Lost, Now Found, One Drop of Blood Between Us, references the one drop of blood rule. Can you explain what that is for people who might not know?
Sure, yeah. And so the one drop of blood rule in America was how they determined who was black and who was not. It was, as slavery was starting to become entrenched, there was free blacks and slaves and, mixing happening from the beginning. And so you had these biracial kids walking around, and there was a little bit of like, what is their status, right? And so politically, it benefited slave owners to say, if you have one drop of blood, you are black. And so it was a way of determining who was black and who wasn't. And it was all encompassing that way. It benefited the institution of slavery, right? And so this one drop of blood rule was upheld in the Supreme Court as late as the 1984 or 1985. There was a woman who identified as white, married white, had white kids, passed as white, but her birth certificate said colored, and so she wanted to change her birth certificate to white, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that if it says you're colored on your birth certificate, you are colored. And so when again, I'm a light complected biracial black man. I used to have a big, beautiful afro. Having middle-aged balding or losing my hair, or my hair doesn't grow like as powerfully as it once did. And so how my identity is perceived, sometimes I pass, and depending on how my hair has been, I've had afros, I've had dreadlocks, I've shaved my head. And so my perceived identity is very fluid. I self-identify as black or mixed. And part of the reason is because of the one drop of blood rule, that history tells me I'm black. So the Supreme Court says I'm black. And that's one of the reasons why I identify as black is because of this rule. So it's, so that's what it is.
Awesome. Thank you. So as another mixed race person, talking to other mixed race people, I feel like this thing that is coming up a lot lately about not belonging and not feeling like you are, fitting in with like your whiteness or with your blackness or with your Latina-ness or whatever, And I recently heard the title racial imposter syndrome, and I thought it was really interesting because I feel like it defines kind of how I've felt about myself for a long time. But I mean, one of the questions I have about it is how can we either individually or collectively like address those types of feelings and those types of things, that are coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. I think this is another complex issue because so as part of my lived experience, every time I meet a biracial black person, I'm always like, oh, how do you identify? And I've just kind of talked to lots of people about this, and I've formally interviewed people about this. And so it runs the gambit. I mean, I met a person who was like, she said, you define your blackness, right? Like it's you do, their blackness is all kinds of things, and you define what is black for you, which I thought was an interesting statement. I've met biracial people, black people who were like, I don't like black people. I prefer white people, and then I've met people, and at least in my experience, people that have had both parents in their lives. I've met people that are like, I'm black and I'm white, and I'm comfortable in both of those worlds. And if you have a problem, that's your problem, not my problem. And people that are very comfortable in their skin. For me, I don't know if, I think it's probably imposter syndrome, but I definitely that's not how I've thought about it, but I kind of look at it like white racism tells me I'm not white, and I've had lots of experiences dealing with that. And then because I grew up in a white household, and where I grew up in San Diego in a very diverse neighborhood, there was mixed race kids and black kids and white kids and Mexican kids, and so I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, but my family unit was white. And so I feel very comfortable and actually desire black spaces, but culturally, I don't feel like I fit in. Like I feel culturally like I'm white. And so I don't feel black enough. And then racism tells me I'm not white. So I exist in a space where I don't feel like I belong. And that's the space that I try to paint about, right? And I think in this way, kind of art making has been a very positive way for me to kind of express and deal with these feelings. I could, I wasn't a good kid when I was younger, and I fought a lot, I got in trouble a lot, and I think I could have dealt with these issues in a destructive way, and I think art making allow me to kind of place it somewhere that was a positive thing. But so I think, I would say, I don't think I would have said racial imposter syndrome. That's probably what I'm experiencing, but I would describe it as I culturally don't fit in, or I don't feel black enough, and then I'm definitely not white enough because of racism. So.
Well, I love that comment that somebody made to you about how you define your blackness, and I feel like that's really empowering, and that I think that feels really good to hear that.
Totally.
Because it is I have heard that it's a spectrum,
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Yeah. And I kind of, before we change subjects, I kind of feel like I conceptualize it like there's this little Michael inside of me, and I haven't quite figured out how to protect that little Michael, because when someone challenges, because I self-identify as black, but when someone says, "Oh, I didn't know you were black," or someone would say, I've had a black student, because I'm a college professor, I've had a black student say, "Oh, I thought you were black. You're not black," and say that to my face, right? And so that's it's like a death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's like it's like my Achilles heel. I just melt inside when someone says something like that, and I haven't quite figured out how to, create like a hard candy shell around little Michael. So, and maybe I never will find that peace, but that's a real thing that I carry around with me. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's a good transition into vulnerability, because that's something I've really noticed with your work and with your willingness to be vulnerable and telling your story so openly. So would you mind talking about vulnerability and how it informs your work?
Yeah, no, I think firstly, the work that I love the most, just as a viewer, is work that's vulnerable. I think I think being vulnerable is the most sincere space you can be in, right? And so I like that in other people's work. So I try to emulate that in my own work. I think it's a great space to learn about yourself. It's a great space to have open, honest conversations. I think authenticity is important to me. And so I think we are our most authentic selves, being vulnerable, right? And I think it invites other people to also be vulnerable, and I think that's important. And I value that in other work, so I definitely try to walk that walk, if you will, in my own work. Right. And it wasn't, it wasn't easy in the beginning, right? So like I said, I graduated in 1999, and I've had practice being vulnerable since 1999. so it's much more natural now. It was not necessarily as natural in the beginning, is what I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
So
Fair.
lots of practice.
Definitely. Awesome.
So we've gotten kind of a nice picture of your evolution, I guess, as an artist and what you've been working on up to now. But how do you see your practice evolving in the future?
Yeah, I think my practice will always include painting of some sort. I think I'll probably branch out more into, like, so I made a sculpture, which props to any sculptors out there, because that shit was hard. So I did a couple videos, so I think I'm more interested, or becoming more interested, in bringing other elements into the conversation, right? And I still feel like I'm learning how to paint, so I don't think that'll go away. Like, every painting is hard, and I feel like I'm back in painting one, so, and I want to be a really good painter, and in that way it's still interesting to me, and it's still difficult, and it's still challenging. So I don't think I will stray far from painting. And I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe one day I'll be like, I've achieved my masterpiece. I am the master painter, and I'll burn the brushes and go do something else. But until that happens, I think painting, I kind of want to die in my studio mid brush stroke would be very romantic for me. Just massive heart attack as I'm painting my masterpiece. That's how I want to leave the planet. So I kind of feel like painting is where my heart is, and it's still so challenging and so difficult that I don't think I'll stray too far from it. So
That's interesting to hear you say that.
yeah.
Every time you go to the canvas to paint, you still feel like you're in painting 101 or
Yeah.
something. Because I'm definitely not a painter. I've painted before, but I'm absolutely not a painter, and I imagine painters as just progressing in their evolution to this point where they're like, oh, it's like second nature, and they're just like, making happy little trees and whatever.
Mm-hmm. There's a great book. It's called a Giacometti Portrait, and I can't think of the author, but it's a very thin book. It's one of my favorites, and it's a guy who is friends with Giacometti. And I love Giacometti. I'm not a huge fan of his sculptures. Love his paintings. And Giacometti's at the height. I mean, he's at the height of his career. I mean, he's super famous, probably very wealthy, and this guy agrees to sit for him and let Giacometti paint him. And Giacometti is like procrastinating, and so what should have just been like a one-day thing ends up being like he's there for like 10 days or something, or a week, and just every day Giacometti's like, oh man, I suck, I can't paint, and he's erasing the painting out, and he does it again, and he erases the painting and does it again, and it's just so validating that here's this guy that's at the top of his craft, and he still struggles with things that I struggle with, and I think that's probably, that's the artist's life, I mean, I don't think this ever goes away,
I agree.
Is my point. Yeah.
I agree.
Fully.
Yeah.
Wait, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
But yeah, no, I feel like that as an artist myself, no matter how many times I've done something or understood something or done something in the past, it always feels like I'm wrestling with myself in some way in every single project. There's always this like moment of really like so much tension, and like I'm working through things, whatever it is, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, like it all just like comes out. And then when the project's done, I'm like, oh, that's what that is. This is what I made. This is what I worked through. This is what I was like, I finally understand it, but when like, it's a battle sometimes, like every project going through things.
Sure. I think the bravest thing anyone ever does is goes into the studio.
I I was gonna say though, I do feel like you're being modest because you've been cranking out all these paintings in the what has it only been like 6 weeks?
Yeah, but you're not there when I'm crying in the corner. And
That's why I always knock when I come to the studio.
I'm wiping tears off before I answer the door. That's what's happening. Splashing water on my face. Hey.
Yeah. Well, how about as a professor and mentor to art students? What advice would you give to someone just starting out on the art path?
Yeah, I mean, I think don't give up. It'd be the number one advice. And I think, you have to find a mentor, find someone that cares about you and hold on to that person. I think mentorship is the key to success. That's my favorite part of my job is mentorship. I'll do that all day, every day. I love that. When a student's like, I want to go to grad school. How do I get into grad school? Or I want to go to an artist residency. How do I do that? Or, whatever that thing is where they're real interested in pursuing art. I love that. Unfortunately, I teach a lot of like drawing one, and it's usually students that don't care. But it's mostly that. But then you'll get one or two students that are real passionate, and that's the best part of teaching for me. Is But I think the other thing that I would mention is that I tell a lot of my students is that being an artist is essentially running a small business, and I don't think art schools do a great job of, and I think what I would advise people is if you can get out of undergrad with a little bit of business skill set, like a little bit of business would be great, and writing well is the other skill set that is not emphasized enough, I don't think. So as an artist, you're writing all the time. You have to be able to communicate in the written word. And then a little bit of business. You got to have that elevator pitch. You got to be able to look someone in the eye and say, that'll be $15,000. It's a business. You're the secretary, the marketing agent, the janitor, the genius. You wear all of those hats, and so that would be my advice.
There's not really other industries that operate like that, which I think is why being an artist is like such a crazy path.
Yeah, and it's and it's hard, and so anything worth doing is hard, and I think 99% of us have a job and we make our work. So I think I was a little bit naive as a young person, thinking, I'm gonna make it someday, but I think there's a small, I think there's a very small percentage of people that have some crazy career where they skyrocket up really quickly. But most of us, it's just a slog, getting up, getting in the studio every day and doing it, and being consistent. And I think if you're doing it for wealth and fame, you're gonna quit real soon.
Right.
I think you have to be doing it because you are passionate about it. Whether you become famous or make any money at all, would you continue making art? I think that's the big question. So yeah.
Cool. Well, you've been working with the PlatteForum Art Lab interns for the last 8 weeks. Ish, roughly 6 weeks.
Next week will be week 8, so 7 weeks.
Yeah. So, do you have anything that you want to share about what it was like to work with them? Any funny stories? Anything that you want to give people a heads up on as far as what their work is going to be like in the show?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I've approached the art lab, and I meet with them about 3 hours a week. It's like 2.5 hours a week, so it's not a lot of time, and they're doing lots of other things too, and so it's kind of hard. I'm just like one little thing of their week, kind of a thing. But I think, and so what we've been doing is I've been sharing that I've kind of put together. I teach workshops at Penland and Arrowmont, fairly, frequently, or I've done it a bunch of times, and I have a workshop that I've developed for those spaces, and it's really kind of just sharing the process of how I make my work. This new body of work I'm making is a little bit different than how I normally work, in that how I normally work is all of my imagery comes from a performance of some sort, whether in my studio or out in the real world. I've been using family photos most recently, but which I don't recommend, FYI. And so I usually will do a performance. I document that performance, and then I use the photos to make my paintings. And so we've been doing a version of that. And so we've talked about color theory. We learned how to draw a self-portrait. Then we learned how to mix flesh tones, and then we painted a self-portrait. And every week I've met with the kids, they've done a little performative act, and every time we do a performative act, I ratchet it up. It gets more, the danger level gets higher and higher and higher. And so probably one of the last things we did before they did their own performances is I had them get up and sing in front of everyone, right? And so prior to that, we sang as a group, and then the next time I saw them, they had to sing a couple of bars on their own, or maybe with one or two people. So there was actually one of the, he's like this quiet, one of the quietest, most shyest kids in the class. And so we're singing individually. He sang by himself, and this kid, barely talks. And he busted out in this song. He sang this song by Lord, which is extremely hard, difficult, and just killed it.
Wow, that's amazing.
And he probably sang the longest out of everyone, and that was pretty awesome.
That was awesome. Everybody's clapping with it.
And he was actually looking at people and pointing to them, and
wow.
And had was pretending to hold a mic, and he kind of killed that. And then there was one other performance that was really good, where one of the students went out on the street corner, on Larimer, a busy corner, and put a trash bag over his body, and he played the saxophone through the trash bag.
Wow.
And that was actually pretty good too.
I wish I could have seen that.
Yeah. And so those were two exceptional performances. And so now they're painting images from those performances. So that's what I think the exhibition of their work will be a little bit of all of the things we've done, but the end paintings will be of their performances. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So how has the residency been supportive for you? Has it been fulfilling for you in any specific ways?
Well, listen, I think that artists are always looking for time, space, and money. Time, space, and funding, let's say. And you usually have a combination of those things, or maybe you have none of those things. But I think PlatteForum has provided all of those things: a place to live, a studio space, and some funding. And I think when you have all three of those things it's a gift. So PlatteForum has given me the gift of time, space, and funding. Although I haven't seen that funding yet. I'm waiting for that check. And so that's pretty special. And again, I think, as an artist, I'm always and I'll speak for all artists. I think we're all looking for those things, or some combination of those things. So in that way, it's been a very special time, and it is really a gift to roll out of bed, and the only thing you have to worry about is getting to the studio is a gift, because most of my time is not like that.
Right. Thanks again for listening to that episode of Art Moves podcast. Just a reminder that Once Lost, Now Found, One Drop of Blood Between Us can be seen at the PlatteForum Annex Gallery. The opening is July 28th, 2023 from 6 to 8 p.m. The address is 3575 Ringsby Court, Denver, Colorado 80216. And please consider giving a donation to PlatteForum at platteforum.org, PlatteForum.org. Thanks, everybody.